I was born here. I was born here in 1946, on August 28th. So I have been in Zielona Góra the whole time. And where did your parents come from? My parents came from Greater Poland, Wielkopolska. Well, here after the war, that is to say, my dad was demobilized here and stayed, and my mom came, Dad brought my mom. And well, I was born here, already in Zielona Góra, and I have lived and resided here in Zielona Góra the whole time. And so many years have passed already. At the time of the outbreak, outbreak sounds very grandiloquent, but in May 1960, what were you doing? And how did you find yourself here? Well, back then I was going to 7th grade of primary school. It was the 7th, the last grade of primary school, and I was also an altar boy here in the parish church. I was going to 7th grade and was trying to prepare to go to high school later. Well, but on the 30th, no, the 29th of May, a Sunday, the parish priest during Mass read a statement from the city authorities that there would be an occupation of the Catholic house, which served as a catechetical center, where religion was taught to kindergarten and primary school children. Then it was announced, specifically in that written notice from the authorities, that around 9 o'clock the occupation of this facility would take place. The next morning, being in the church, I spoke a little more with the priest, and then I went to school and told my classmates that the Catholic house was being occupied. I told them that I was already going to this place, to this square, to see what it was about, how it was going to unfold. To my question, maybe you want to come with me? Nobody wanted to go with me. I came alone. That is to say, I skipped classes from school and came here to the square, and, in fact, I found here in this square that there was a small group of people, of women. Mostly they were middle-aged women, and there were some men, but there were more women, and some gentlemen arrived. That's how I saw them, with long coats, uniforms, grey in colour, and they entered the Catholic house and then, excuse me, to the building behind us, to that first entrance. They entered, and from there women and children came out. Other men also arrived, who were dressed normally as if going to work, with jackets, and they did the work there, while those in the long coats supervised. Evidently they were officials executing an order from the authorities. Well, those men started to take out the stations of the cross, that is, the paintings and the crosses, and threw them in front of the door, in front of the building. They threw them like that on the right side of the door, and that's why the people who were at the scene became indignant. Well, how can you throw those religious objects like that, and so disrespectfully? If at least they had gathered them, if they had stacked them in some way, it would have been different. And so, the people reacted, "How can you? What are you doing?" And the people started shouting, and the women, one over the other, they have that shrill and piercing voice. But well, those people as well as those in the coats started asking them to disperse and so on, for the people to leave. We have to sort out this matter here. I was standing in front of this group, I didn't speak. I was just like a witness. At that moment I heard from behind how someone was singing "We Want God," the chant "We Want God." And well, and I, as a singer, also started singing along with him and turned around to see who had sung and was singing so loudly. It turned out to be a second lieutenant in the Polish army. So I thought, an officer singing so bravely. I liked it a lot, and I sang like that too. But then, over time, more and more people arrived. They joined us, and in the end they started kicking out those who were emptying the place. They started getting closer to those who were taking the religious objects out of those little rooms. They hadn't touched the benches yet. No. And now the women there started defending the objects they were taking out, and they instead started pushing them. And then the people started to rebel. How is this? Why are you pushing the women? What is this? What does this mean? We are going to teach you a lesson right here. A crowd of people had already gathered, So they, the officials, got scared because there weren't many of them. They got scared and hid. Then they also asked for help. Later, I, after some time, went back to school one more time to convince my classmates to come, because we have to defend this place. Where are we going to study religion? After all, this house. The people also started shouting that this is a house for learning religion, for meetings, for performing the Passion, for religious services, for shows, simply nativity scenes or something like that. We took advantage of the activities, because I myself, of course, participated in them. So I know how it was. But well, unfortunately, there was no way. More and more people were gathering here. They started shouting loudly. Later a detachment of the ZOMO and the militia arrived. And well, it all started. The people here were shouting and pushing so hard that the officials started to push the people, who started to flee, because they started throwing smoke bombs. That smoke irritated the eyes a lot. And well, the tears fell on their own. They welled up from the eyes and they chased the people towards the church. They drove them away from this place. But well, the crowd later got bigger. So they started back towards the other side to chase them. And well, it was a constant pushing and shoving like that. Sometimes they chased. They even chased also with those smoke canisters, with firecrackers. Well, they threw those. And I was with a classmate. Precisely that second time I went. I convinced a classmate to come with me. And well, there he was. They had already chased us towards Mariaka Street and almost to the town hall. And they threw those smoke canisters at us there, at those people, and I pumped water. I wet the handkerchief and cleaned his back. And we went back again. He was very agile. He ran very fast and threw back those smoke bombs. But to me that smoke stung my eyes so much. That smoke. And I took out the handkerchief to dry my eyes, and then that powder started burning my eyes. It was an unbearable pain. I had to lower my head and retreated backwards. And well, that's how it was until noon. Until what time I don't know exactly. But I think until 1 p.m. more or less it was a constant pushing and shoving. Sometimes some pushed. They chased those from the ZOMO and the militiamen, and other times they chased the civilian people. And so it went. And tell me, how was it that someone started throwing stones? Because back then the stone throwing wasn't happening yet. No. It was only later, when more arrived, when more ZOMO agents and police arrived, then they started. But that was already around 1 p.m. Past 1 p.m. Past 2 p.m. And all that lasted all day since the morning. Yes, from morning until night it lasted, and it was later when they started throwing stones. How was it here, where that gallery is now? That was the PKS bus station. Ah, yes. Well, here was the PKS, and next to it, on Kasprowick Street, was the militia station, the militia headquarters, and when the crowd chased them away, they hid in that building, in that blue one here, of the old militia headquarters. That was when the stones started flying, because since they hid, the people started pulling up stones, cobblestones, and threw them at that building, and there they broke all the windows. Since I couldn't get close to the militia headquarters with so many people there, I couldn't make my way over there. I took a detour, taking an alternative route down Sobieski Street towards Kasprowick Street. I went in and, at the height of the fire department's entrance gate, opposite there was also a door to a courtyard, and there was Cezas or some company like that, that provided schools with school supplies. Cezas. Yes, those school supplies, and well, I was there, but it was already afternoon. It was around, in my opinion, I don't know if I calculated it right, 4 p.m. hours, and then also from there with stones they were also throwing, and at a given moment I look back, toward Sobieski Street, and I see that advancing therein, how to say it, a cordon are militiamen. I see them with helmets, with protective plastic safety masks, those masks as protection against stones, against some objects, and with batons. They had very long batons, or so it seemed to me, but so imposing that I thought, no, now we have to flee from here. I even shouted. I said, look, the militia is coming from behind. And well, those people who were fleeing, escaped towards the courtyard of that Cezas. Cezar of Cezas. Yes, to the Cezas, and me too to that building that you see here, that big building. There was an entrance to the basement there, down some stairs to the basement. I also hid there from the law enforcement. A lot of people entered. There were some basements there separated only by some wooden slats. After some time the militiamen arrived at that door. They opened the door of that basement and started shouting, come out slowly. They started shouting for them to come out, for everyone to come out, and here there was a silence as if there was nobody. Pero at a given moment, the women who had entered that basement started talking there, well, to come out one after the other. And they started coming out. I was thinking, well, what do? I heard there, show your paws. That's how they said it to those who were coming out. And they moved them to the side, and I, upon hearing show your paws, spat saliva on my hands and rubbed them on my pants. And that commander who was there shouting at each one, saw me, and you, brat, what are you doing here? After all, I was less than 14 years old. Show your hands. I showed my hands. Run. He said, get out of here. By his side was a militiaman holding a baton, and he raised it to strike. I saw out of the corner of my eye how he was preparing to give me a blow to the back with the baton, and then I immediately started to run. I don't know how it was that I did such a sprint, and I only felt how the tip of that baton brushed my shirt. It was hot. I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, well, like a blouse, and across that blouse past the tip of the baton. I ran out towards the Slovak square, Plak Slowiansky, and only then could I catch my breath. Out of fear, I wasn't breathing. I was just running. And well, then I went home. And where did you live then? On Fabriksna Street. There were some apartment blocks there with some balconies, and those blocks are still there. I returned home, and my mom tells me, and where were you? Why are you so frightened? Well, I was there next to the Catholic house. I told the truth. And what did you go there for? She asks, and my mom yelled at me, because I think she was just cooking. She was doing something there. But, well, I couldn't hide it. So she locked me in the house until night. Well, that was my business. That same night, past 10 p.m. my dad returned from work. He worked the second shift. And where did he work? At Polska Wełna, Polish wool. At Polska Wełna he worked. Mom was angry with me the whole time, and to Dad she says, oh, he went over there, and for what? As if she was complaining about me, right? Well, and what do you want from him? Dad asked. After all, it was for a just cause. It was then that I grew up a bit. Well, since Dad is on my side. And well, that's how it was. That's how that night was. Later it turned out that the militiamen or the plainclothes investigators went to the schools and took the students away, even someone from my class. They didn't have me in their photos. Some boys didn't show up the next day at school. I don't know, but they couldn't be arrested. They were only detained. Yes, they detained them. To school they came shaved clean, bald, and well, it was known that it was the militia, that they must have actively participated. I tried to talk to them. They didn't want to say anything. Nothing of what happened there. They were intimidated by those interrogations by the militia. Later I didn't speak either. They didn't want to talk. So I didn't speak either. Well, for what? But at school, even after those events, I think within a week, the teacher who taught me Polish language said in class that in the newspapers they wrote who had started this, who was to blame here and so on, that it was the parish priest who provoked these riots here. Who was the parish priest then? It was the priest Canon Kazimierz Michalski. And so he blamed this priest, as an article had been written against him, and the teacher asked, "What do you all think of this?" And the teacher himself also gave on his part such a comment that went along the same lines as those newspapers. No, he didn't stick his neck out at all. Everyone had to write something about what they thought. So I wrote on a piece of paper what I was supposed to and signed normally. But I wrote a different one, that was not true, that it was not the parish priest who provoked the incident here, but that he only read in the announcements that there would be an occupation of this Catholic house by the authorities. And well, that this is dishonest and what they write in the newspapers does not match the truth, and I signed it as the little elf. I wrote something else there, that whoever repeats such nonsense lacks a bit of a brain. That's how I wanted to annoy that teacher. And well, later the matter reached the principal, because, after all, they recognized from the handwriting that it was me. The principal called me. "Did you write this?" I lowered my head. I didn't say anything. But well, the truth had to be told. "Did you write it?" He yells at me. In the end I say yes. "Run and get your mother." So I went for my mom. Mom came and asks, "What have you done? What mischief have you done?" I didn't say anything. The principal spoke with my mom. He says, "After all, now he won't be able to get into any school. It is 7th grade, the end of primary school. Well, he will receive a wolf ticket, expulsion with a ban on studying, and will stay sitting at home." And well, but in the end he says like this, he called me from the hallway, because I was in the hallway, he was only talking to Mom, and then he tells me, "Do you want to study?" I say, "Well, I want to study." "And are you going to be calm now, polite? You're not going to be doing those pranks or something?" I say, "I won't do it." And so I gave him my word. He says, "Well, then it's fine, then go to classes." And the principal was like that, in relation to me, very lenient, you could say. And he also belonged to the party. That was my experience in that school. But what else could I say? I have a question, if I may. Later in your adult life, did you suffer the consequences of this, or not? Even though you were just a child participating in the events. Consequences? Not really, because I had support from that principal. And in adult life? Well, I don't know. I didn't feel it. But I mean, I felt that I was being watched by the authorities, and I had a supervisor like that, from the militia, and he often called. When I was already an adult, he also called the house. Even when I had already gotten married, he called, and well, those were the problems I had. I mean, I was under some kind of supervision. I understand. But did this also result in, for example, problems at work, that you couldn't get a job? No, it's not that. With work, rather, somehow they made it easier for me, because I got a job. You know what? I didn't talk more about myself there, but I went to the seminary, and that's why I had that supervisor being an adult. I interrupted the seminary. Then I was also in the army. After the army I returned, and I had this supervisor, who constantly harassed me. Why dwell on it so much? Since secular life is also very good. People are needed. He shoved that propaganda at me. And I say, I have my own understanding. I do what I want. But in the end, I left the seminary anyway and got married. And where did you enter the seminary? There, in the clerical seminary. In Paradise. But well, I got married. Well, all right. And I have a question. And how do you evaluate that incident after so many years? Do you think it was necessary that it lasted too short? Because it shouldn't be like that, that if the people do not like such an authority, that from above wants to take something away from these people of what the people enjoyed before, well, then it is as if the people were right and not the authority. That authority should approach the people humanely, simply talk to them, so that the people would agree, and not based on force, that since we have the power, we decide everything. If the people rebelled against such an authority, well, it is obvious. The discontent begins, various epithets and insults were directed at the authorities and at the ruling party. This situation caused problems for those people who were shouting. I consider that such spontaneous opposition, let's say, to the orders of the authorities that threaten the social order, well, then the people are right. I agree with the people and not the authorities. It is possible that the authorities needed that building to use it for something else. Just as here they allocated it to the Philharmonic, but it was like an artificial provocation of a conflict on the part of the authorities, because they provoked it. They provoked it. Well, because they allocated it to the Philharmonic, but a Philharmonic has to be built, because after all the building was not adapted for orchestra or Philharmonic concerts to be held here. Well, they did it by force, although there was a hall for presentations there, but it was too small for a Philharmonic, especially because another modern one has already been built next door. Yes, later, after so many years, but like that by force. And now you can see that this building as if it only served them as, I don't know, maybe for rehearsals, yes, and not for concerts. It is not used just as it was originally. The entire organization of religious life, catechesis classes for the youth, meetings, where were they moved? They remained here, in this place, a small catechetical room. That single small room was independent, I think built as an annex, and in that small room religion classes were given, because in schools there weren't any either. In those times first there was religion in school, but they quickly banned it, because when Gomulka came to power, first religion was introduced in schools. From 1956 and until 1960 there was religion. Already in 1961 there wasn't, because after these incidents even here in Zielona Góra they quickly withdrew religion from the schools and you had to go to religion classes. I was already going to classes in high school here to this small catechetical room. And where did you do your high school? They're in the same school where I did primary. I graduated, because it was a new school and there was a high school there at the same time and a primary school, whose principal, well, simply continued to be kind to me and allowed me to study, because at the beginning I also submitted documents for the minor seminary after 7th grade. The authorities were liquidating those minor seminaries. So I went to school in September. I brought breakfast for my brother and my sister. And well, I am sitting in the hallway, and the principal comes. Oops, now he is going to scold me. But well, the principal says, and what are you doing here? Why aren't you in school? Don't you have classes? What school do you go to? After all, you had your papers submitted to the construction school, right? I tell him that I don't go to any school. How can you not be going? Come to the office. To the office, and he immediately added, go get your mother. And again my mom came. What have you done there again? You went to school and again you did some mischief. I say, I haven't done anything wrong, just that the principal is calling you. She entered the office and I say to myself now, that my time has come. And the principal, why did you allow him that clerical seminary? My mom and I got a good scolding. And to me he says, do you want to study? Yes. Well over half of September had already passed. I tell him that I want to study. He says, good, then come tomorrow with the documents. The entrance exam I had to take in Polish language and in mathematics. I think there were no other subjects in the exams then. And I also added that I have a classmate who would also like to go to school. Isn't it enough that I sorted it out for you? But you are also going to drag a classmate along with you to sort out his admission to school? Well, okay, go and tell him to come too. And in the end, we went to that school. The principal's protection over me there was, let's say, that he watched over me, so that they wouldn't harm me there. Because there were those intentions, not in a physical sense, but for example, that I wouldn't pass the Matura, high school exit exam, and things like that. There were also threats. But well, the principal admitted me for the Matura, and that was it. I passed the Matura, and in the Matura I did very well. The teachers of each subject I studied knew what kind of student I was, but others didn't pass all the subjects. After the Matura, when the principal announced that, unfortunately, one person hadn't passed the Matura, my blood ran cold, as if it had drained from me. I tell myself that it's definitely me, and I didn't hear anything else. My classmate is standing next to me, and the principal goes and congratulates. One by one, he gives his congratulations to the students. And and it turned out that a female classmate did not pass the matura. He approaches and held out a small hand to me. I didn't see it, and I stood there as if paralyzed. A classmate nudged me with his elbow. I say, "What's wrong?" And he says that the principal is congratulating me. I say, "Why?" And the principal says, "Well, I congratulate you for having passed the matura, and I wish you all the best." And there I say, "Thank you. I simply didn't know what was happening." But well, some teachers during the breaks in the matura exams, because we had to take exams for several subjects in a single day, approached me with congratulations. "Good. I congratulate you. How good that you passed it." No. Not you, formal, but that you, informal, passed it. Because they spoke to me like a student. And well, I was glad about that there were teachers like that, who supported me. Speaking of that Polish language teacher, who made us write what we thought about the defense of the Catholic house, well, his wife, and I found this out from one of the teachers, she gave her husband a good scolding for the fact that she told him that in class he had brought up that topic unnecessarily. "What have you done?" And she also threw in a couple more words at him. That lady also taught me in high school. In that subject I was doing very well, because it was physics and I was very good at physics. So on that side I wasn't in any danger, right? But by the way, in the meantime, I will tell you something else. In the workplaces, they organized meetings like that. Some rallies they organized like that at 100% of the quota, and who knows how much. Yes. And at Polska Wełna, Polish wool, something like that also took place. Did you work at Polska Wełna? No. No. My dad worked there. And where did you? I worked as an adult at the Union of State Agricultural Farms, PGR. They hired me to work there. And also, well, I don't know. It was exactly also that those who supervised there, those who like that watched me, it was so that I wouldn't stand out, wouldn't get into trouble. But then still in the year 60, at that rally at Polska Wełna, my dad took the floor and said that the parish priest Canon Kazimierz Michalski, he defended him, only informed the people that it would be so, the liquidation of the Catholic house, but then, where to teach those children? After all, what they learn there is the truth. Nothing bad happens there. It only has a good purpose and so on. And later they said that my dad was threatened, that he would be left without a job, that they would fire him. And there were those altercations there. And the trade unions defended my dad. After all, he told the truth. So why must he be fired, right? And from the party, there was pressure from those who belonged to the party to fire him. And in the trade unions things varied. Maybe they also belonged to the party, but they were more human, so to speak. Well, they came out in defense of the worker. I see it that way. And my mom just went around crying all the time. And this dragged on for 3 months. It was like going to work, but without knowing what will happen. At any moment they could fire him. But well, in the end they didn't fire him, because then that secretary of the PZPR, Polish United Workers' Party, who ruled here in the voivodeship, in the city, did not allow the dismissal of my father. My dad, working, gave an example of commitment. He worked so many years, and his labor contribution at Polska Wełna was recognized. And well, that's the way things are.